We now move on to the next session on epidemic management. Louis Pasteur described what they do. Robert Koch postulated on how they work. Alexander Fleming found a way to stop them in their tracks. Almost a century later, we are still continuing the battle against communicable diseases causing pathogens. At this cusp of epidemiological and demographic transition in India, the need to effectively manage and prevent and contain epidemics is a key step in reducing the dual burden of diseases. We all hope for the best, but need to prepare for the worst when it comes to epidemic management. How do we go about this? We are honored to have Dr. Sanjay Madhav Mehendale to enlighten us on epidemic management. Dr. Mehendale is currently the Director Research, PD Hinduja Hospital and Medical Research Center. Dr. Mehendale is also a former Additional Director General and Scientist H, Indian Council of Medical Research. Dr. Mehendale has worked in diverse projects with National Institute of Radiology, Pune, and National AIDS Research Institute, Pune during his career. We invite Dr. Mehendale to give his talk.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for this opportunity, Dr. Shalini and Dr. Sivakami, to be here with all of you. I also see Professor Sundarajan here. Actually very glad to be here. I'm going to talk about the issues in epidemic management. And this whole thing starts with the issue of preparedness. You know, this is the most neglected area while we talk about and think about epidemic management. Because if we are really good in preparing ourselves for the emerging and re-emerging infections, and I will talk about what do they mean actually, and at predicting as well as forecasting the impending outbreaks, we will be able to do a much better job than what we are able to do today. So basically over the last several years, last 30-40 years, we have seen a lot of epidemics coming and hitting us. The latest one being the H1N1, all of us know. We experienced HIV/AIDS, we experienced SARS, we experienced plague, we experienced acute encephalitis syndrome, Nipah virus, anthrax, MERS. All these came, they became big news for a certain period of time. Some of them continue to affect us, some of them have gone. Doesn't mean that they have gone forever. Emerging diseases are those which were not there with us, but that have come to visit us. They have visited us, caused some kind of an impact on human life and economy, and have been remaining with us in a subdued manner. There are certain infections which just went like this, but then came back again, and now are bothering us again and again. There are good examples like malaria. We felt once that we are able to make a good control on that. We felt chikungunya is gone starting from 2006. It just went on to play a lot of havoc, but by 2011, suddenly chikungunya was gone, but it has come back all over again. So many of these do keep coming and going. So these are the kind of problems that we are going to face. One thing is we have to understand they will always be with us. Every time the problem will change, the nature of the problem will change, but some or the other public health problem in terms of outbreaks and epidemics, we will always have to deal with. There are many factors that can be linked to this emergence and re-emergence. The most important being discussed these days is zoonosis. Many of these new viruses that we are coming across, or many other pathogens that we are coming across, are primarily found in animals. They are accidentally spilling over to human beings. Not only animals that are in our close surrounding like pets and other domesticated animals, but now as we are going into the territory of wild animals, some of the viruses which we were not exposed to all these days, we are also getting an access to them and bringing them back into humans. So there is a very strong zoonosis angle to this. Zoonoses are diseases which primarily affect animals but are capable of spilling over to human beings. Microbes are adopting themselves also to a large extent. They are changing their structures. So influenza virus changes its structure, and by the time you are able to do a good vaccination against the prevalent strain which is there today, 3 years down the line you get another strain which has changed in its structure and is capable of starting a new epidemic on its own. We are getting many organisms where we are now talking about antimicrobial resistance. This was for the realization about this resistance to various microbes that we are dealing with is becoming more and more glaring. We have started very sincere work at the national level on detecting antimicrobial resistance very recently, and it is really shocking to understand why we see that. This is one of the reasons why I see huge mortality in many of the hospitalized patients as well. Another factor which facilitates this whole thing is international travel and commerce. People who are infected travel abroad, then they take the disease with them. Through the trade links, through the products that are used in the trade, the infections can carry to the neighboring countries. There are porous borders where there are no regulations how people go from one country to another, and that's how also the disease tends to travel, which is another important thing. This is a classical example is SARS, where the whole disease started in a single hotel. It spread among few people in that particular hotel, and from there every individual going back to his own country took the disease there, and eventually it spread to large number of countries, nearly 25 countries, causing 8,500 cases and 850 deaths over a very short period of time. This is the kind of havoc some of the diseases which are capable of transmitting quickly can cause on human beings. But one good thing, this was one of the first diseases, I would say, wherein scientists through a very coordinated effort, committed effort, were able to produce vaccine in a record time point, and we now have an effective vaccine to deal with this. So as bad things are happening, technologically we are also advancing. There is also inadequacy of public health infrastructure that leads to resurgence of some diseases. For example, the deterioration of vector control measures. One of the most important epidemics that occur in our country are almost invariably due to vector-borne diseases. And the most effective way for control of this comes through vector control. But this is the most difficult thing and a great public health challenge. It should all start with elimination of breeding places of mosquitoes. Are we able to do that? Had we been able to do that, we would have eradicated malaria, we would have eradicated dengue fever, we would also have had a good amount of control over chikungunya, but this doesn't seem to be happening. So this is a problem. As you can see, the various countries that have been reporting dengue outbreaks in the last almost 50 years has been continuously increasing, and many countries in the world are getting affected because of dengue fever. Lapses in immunization, one very classic study talks about how the problems due to various political problems, social problems can lead to occurrence of certain diseases. This is a case of former USSR, which got broken down into several smaller countries, and until very recently the things were quite okay as far as diphtheria is concerned, but since this breakdown happened and many new countries came in, the whole emphasis on diphtheria vaccination just was gone away. It went away, and it led to large epidemics due to diphtheria in all these states which have come up as a result of division of USSR subsequently. Which are the emerging infections in India? We also are seeing a large number of emerging infections. We have seen plague recently. We are seeing Nipah virus reported. We see H1N1. We see chikungunya. We see dengue. We see Crimean Congo hemorrhagic fever. We see Kaisanur forest disease. Many of them are emerging in a very big way. In Surat in 1994, within a very short span of few days, large number of people were affected. It led to such a big panic that nearly 25% of the population of Surat just fled away because they were terribly afraid of contracting plague in the whole city. So this was a problem very recently, say 2 decades back, it affected us. See the picture of dengue fever over the period of time, how it had changed, the graph had changed in India. Darker it has become in the recent times, 2010 to 16, what you can see is the prevalence going very high over almost all the states in India. Earlier it was sparingly reported 20-30 years back, but now it can be seen absolutely everywhere in India. Vector control, as I talked about you, how are we going to achieve it? Look at the various places where water can get accumulated. This happens both in urban areas, this happens in rural areas. Some of our research in rural areas where we were able to detect, I was in NIV at that time, so way back, we were able to publish some papers about presence of dengue fever in rural Parvani district of Maharashtra. And what we found the cause to be was this, the household storage tanks just outside your house. The simple problem to that is, in many of these, the government had started giving emphasis on giving the piped water. But piped water would not necessarily come every day and at the specified point of time. So people had to store water in their households, which made this particular, all those places and vessels where it got, water got stored, they became the breeding places for mosquitoes. And how? This is how dengue became a big rural phenomenon all over India over a period of time. Similar things were noted in Kerala, where you can see this rubber plantation where they are collecting those vessels over there where this rubber solution gets collected. That these were found to be the places where mosquitoes started breeding, and then we had to think about various strategies to try and prevent mosquito breeding in such places. Acute encephalitis problem is something which is again bothering us quite a lot. The most important point we have to understand here is these cases are all the time on the rise, particularly in Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. But the line on top just talks about the Japanese encephalitis as one of the causes here. What is important to understand is this disease largely remains undiagnosed even today. Very recently, just last year, papers have come about one potential reason for this could be scrub typhus. So this again is a disease, primarily a zoonotic disease, but has spilled over into human beings. But still, there are many agents that cause acute encephalitis and deaths in children in the states of UP and Bihar, but we still don't know what the cause is all about. This is where the India map shows in green the areas where Japanese encephalitis is a problem. Earlier it was a problem of selected states, but it has also spread over many areas. We had almost forgotten about Kaisanur forest disease. Kaisanur is a forest in Karnataka near Shimoga and the districts surrounding that. There were few districts which were reporting cases of Kaisanur forest disease. But now you can see it is reported in Tamil Nadu, it is reported in Kerala, it's also reported in Sindhudurga district of Maharashtra. So although this disease was pretty restricted, it's a tick-borne disease, and it was all felt that by proper immunization it was also possible to bring down the cases here. Suddenly we start seeing the cases in different parts of the country, mainly because these all other parts of the countries do not have a strategy for immunization against the Kaisanur forest disease. This was reported by National Institute of Virology for the first time, Crimean Congo hemorrhagic fever. It is also a very deadly disease. It causes fatality in many cases. Mostly spread is through bites of ticks. It's a viral fever. And there was an outbreak which was reported in Gujarat pretty recently in 2011. So this is again something which we will have to be looking at in the near future. Diphtheria is something which is known to us for several years. Vaccine against diphtheria is available again for a long time. But what's happening is somehow these DPT booster doses are not getting covered adequately, and that's one of the reasons diphtheria seems to have come back. And you see even large mortality in these areas. What you can see now are these outbreaks which are reported in Delhi, Assam, Maharashtra, Karnataka, various states of India. But what you can see surprisingly is that curve which is shown here talks about the mortality rate or case fatality rate, which is as high as 50% in some areas. So a point of great concern we have to be worried about. If we have to think about towards the end about the strategies for prevention and control of these epidemics and emerging diseases, there are international health regulations now, and all of us generally in the area of public health accept and abide by all of that, and various strategies which are enumerated under that, and we have to be ready with that. I'll go one by one. The first and the most important one is the surveillance and risk assessment. This is part of that preparedness process that I talked about. But what is it that we are going to do under surveillance? For how many diseases are we going to have surveillance networks so that we keep tracking all of it? Please remember, laboratories investigations are always very expensive, and so we cannot always necessarily depend on the lab support. But clinically we have to be very vigilant. We have to find out anything which is happening for the first time. We have to be vigilant about things which is happening atypically, because epidemic by definition itself is occurrence of a large number of cases in a particular area at a particular time, far in excess of what is expected there at that time. That is what we call as epidemic. So if there is nothing in a particular area, even the first case becomes the start of the epidemic in that area. And our surveillance mechanisms essentially should have the ability to pick up the early cases. Laboratory preparedness is must because it provides the early clues about what we are dealing with. Many outbreaks even today get unnoticed or undiagnosed. That is because we don't have appropriate laboratory facilities. To diagnose various fevers or pathogens, we require the samples have to be collected in the right way, the right samples have to be collected, and they have to be transported into the right lab in the right conditions. All this has to happen, only then laboratories can play a good role in epidemic control. But we have to build that capacity over a period of time, because it's a very important complementary activity to the surveillance part. Control of zoonosis gains significance. See, this is nowadays, I'm sure you have heard of the concept of what is called as One Health. We now have started talking about One Health, where we realize that human health doesn't come on its own all alone, but probably it has a lot of influence by animal health also. So if we have to look at control of diseases in humans, probably we also have to look at control of diseases in animals as well, equally effectively. And that's the reason why control of zoonosis becomes an absolutely important thing. But what we sadly see here is the human public health departments do not necessarily talk with the animal public health departments, and they do not have any integrated programs for prevention and control. And that's the reason why we are not able to achieve much in this area which we should be able to. Needless to say, infection control and prevention, they are the most important things. Even if the disease gets notified, certainly the chain of transmission can be broken through various measures which have been known to us. Hand hygiene, starting with as simple as hand hygiene, and personal protective measures, as well as prevention of needle stick injuries, respiratory hygiene, environmental cleaning, waste disposal, and patient care management. All these become extremely important. One more issue I would like to touch upon, and I consider this as an important one, is that of effective media engagement. Many a times, some outbreaks which are not outbreaks get reported as outbreaks. Many a times, even serious outbreaks are there, but they do not get reported, and people are just not aware of what's happening all around. This is because of inability of public health professionals to talk effectively with the media. I suppose media plays a very major role in our lives these days, and we try to seek information, we try to seek knowledge about the recent events as they are happening through the media. And so talking with the media, engaging the media in the right way to give and communicate good messages to the people, right messages to the people, is critically important. Many times rumors start just because people do not know exactly what is happening all around. And so alleviation of these rumors also can play a critical role in control of epidemics. Health emergency communication this plays a very important role in media engagement. There has to be operational communication also. As things are changing, sometimes the type of messages that you are giving out as public health professionals also have to change. They have to be dynamic. That all depends on the phase of the epidemic or the stage of the epidemic that we are dealing with, and it has to be taken into consideration. After all, in many cases, it is the behavior change which can change the course of the epidemic. But so our communication efforts should essentially aim at achieving that. Mostly we fail in this particular aspect because they are not emphasized in the right way. Emergency preparedness, government is giving a lot of importance to that, but government alone probably won't be able to do it. So it is important to develop and maintain public health emergency response plans, to put together the rapid response teams which can just get together within a couple of days and get out for the investigation and control of the epidemics that are happening. So basically, these are the principles that we have to deal with. I just wanted to bring to your notice that the epidemic management doesn't start when the epidemic has already struck. It starts much before that. We have to think about preparing ourselves for any kind of a epidemic that can happen. We have to have the response teams ready. We have to have the appropriate structure ready, which can take care of a large number of cases. Even sometimes you require large number of admissions because of the epidemics. So even the inpatient care facilities and all that preparedness is critically important. Surveillance networks which are established in the country and which are being established more and more, covering more diseases, will help us out in achieving this particular objective. ICMR has established a virology diagnostic network over nearly 70 laboratories all over the country in various medical colleges, and has a plan to expand it to 250 laboratories. They are tracking all viral infections that are happening. There is a surveillance going on all fever cases, all diarrhea cases, and they are able to pick up some outbreaks. But this is a tough job, but it has to be done, and it's a public health challenge. It has to be faced. Thank you.